You're live.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the 62nd week of the Free Assange Online Vigil. My name is Andrew Smith. I am joined by all of my co-hosts today, Steve Poikinen, Kendra Christensen, and the wonderful Misty Winston. But before we get into it, today is day 3,562 of the illegal and arbitrary detention of Julian Assange. It is day 516 since the WikiLeaks founder was trafficked from the Ecuadorian embassy to Belmarsh prison following a $4.2 billion IMF loan to the nation of Ecuador. Julian Assange was in jail without being rearrested from the period of June 24th until Monday, September 7th, 2020, for about 75 or 76 days under the new superseding indictment issued by Bill Barr. There is 58 days left until the Justice Department has to issue additional indictments alongside of this one. It is day 1,194 of federal incarceration for Reality Winner. But in good news, it is day 175 of freedom for Chelsea Manning. And as always, please take the time to check her out on Twitch. She streams Thursday through Sunday from, I believe, 7 until 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Today has been awesome. We have a limited time here, so we may go live a little bit later. We're basically running against a laptop battery, and then if the police decide to show up, because we are outside of the DOJ right now. But how are you today, Misty?
I was muted, but I'm great. How are you?
Wonderful. We are joined by a very special guest. It is Mike Billington. How are you doing today, Mike?
Very well, thanks.
Wonderful. So you are the editor, correct, of the National Intelligence Review, correct?
Executive Intelligence Review, EIR.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about what kind of reporting you guys do, and just like the overall state maybe of where we're at with Julian's trial in relation to national security reporting?
Well, you know, the Assange case, as much of a hero that he is in terms of standing up for the truth, it's actually only a piece, an important piece, but only a piece of a much bigger global strategic showdown that's going on. The British Empire and its assets in the U.S., which have increasingly run the U.S. really since the assassination of Kennedy, has been horrified, absolutely horrified, when one of the candidates in the U.S. presidential race, Donald Trump, said that he wanted to be friends with Russia. And after he got elected, he also wanted to be friends with China and actually declared Xi Jinping to be a great leader of a great nation. This is anathema to the empire. The empire, which is the financial institutions, the City of London, Wall Street, those who have run the Western financial system, has absolutely depended upon keeping this myth of the East versus the West. It used to be the free world versus godless communism, you know. Now you don't have communism in Russia, and you don't really have communism in China either. It's more like socialism with Chinese characteristics. The economy is not communist. But when you had a presidential candidate and then a president who said, at least, he has been unable to implement it, but he said he wants to actually bring the United States and Russia and China together, this would be the end of the empire. So the entire Russiagate hoax was created by the head of MI6, Richard D. Love, and his underling, Christopher Steele. They launched this pseudo campaign based on these lies in the dossier that somehow Trump was a puppet of Putin. They haven't given up yet, as you know. With the Navalny case, they're trying to revive it yet again. But the fact of the matter is that Assange was in the middle of this, because what you had was a situation where obviously, as you all know very well, somebody in the Democratic Party was furious that the party itself was breaking all of its own rules and probably laws, and trying to get Hillary to be the nominee and not Bernie. And somebody in there said, we're going to have to expose that fact, and downloaded these emails and got them to Assange. And Assange, as you know, has been very, very clear that this stuff did not come from the Russians. It's just, he has always said he's not going to say where he gets his material, but it didn't come from the Russians. So I think you know about Bill Binney, right? You're familiar with Bill Binney and what we've done with him recently?
Yeah, Bill's a good friend of the show. We actually were assisting him with all the AMAs that he was doing, making sure that his live streams could be maintained and be able to go up online.
Great, great. Well, we just had a big, big conference this last weekend, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. And in the first session, Bill and his associate, Kurt Wiebe, appeared along with other really important people from Russia, from Italy, basically saying the world is on the verge of nuclear war. We're heading towards a showdown where the military-industrial complex is absolutely committed to preventing the coming together of the United States, Russia, and China, and are willing to risk war against both Russia and China, thinking they can force them to back them down. But even if they don't, they are prepared and willing to go to war. And this is an extreme danger. We're sitting at a precipice in history where we could literally be sleepwalking into World War like we did in 1914 with World War I. But we're dealing here with
I would say it's more of a sleep sprint at this point. And what we have, at least from my perspective, is a president that's willing to play both sides off one another, just to empower himself and those around him. And you can see it really best in the way that his administration has handled Russiagate, where Bob Mueller and Bill Barr are best buddies. They are cleaner friends. Like, they may as well be working for the same janitorial service at this point. And the relationship goes as far back as the BCCI banking scandal, and if not before that. So what's concerning me the most right now isn't the state of international politics, because we couldn't even understand or know what's going to be happening in international politics if we lose these fundamental rights of free speech. And it's the Trump administration's Department of Justice continuing the Obama administration's war on journalism, where the Obama administration built the political theory of charging whistleblowers with the Espionage Act and got the courts to accept it, and now have been able to slowly over time build a case to where they're trying to show conspiracy within reporting on whistleblower information, because they've been so successful in charging whistleblowers with espionage. And that's something that, to me at least, should be a shocking realization for people, is that, good intended or not, it is still Bill Barr and the Trump Department of Justice that are prosecuting WikiLeaks. And it is still Donald Trump and Bill Barr that have the power to stop it.
Well, the question I think you have to address is, how do we resolve this situation? Trump is a complex person, and Barr is clearly an old Bushite. But remember that Trump ran against the Bush administration. He's not a Republican. His entire campaign was based on tearing apart the establishment in both parties. He opposed all of the things that were considered to be, everybody must accept this: the deindustrialization, the climate change story, which said that we must give up industrial development because of climate, which I don't know how you feel about this, but we know this to be a fraud, a part of the British imperial view of finding excuses for keeping the world in a state of backwardness. And basically, most importantly, saying it would be a good thing to be friends with Russia, not a bad thing. And then, even though he attacked China during the campaign because of the trade thing, once he got in, he moved. The question now is, how do we get over this? Now, you have to take, let me mention two things that have happened just in the last week or so. One, as you know, Trump brought up on his own, unprovoked, that perhaps it's time to pardon Snowden. Now, this is extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And if he pardons Snowden, which he knows that Snowden revealed the truth about Clapper, about Brennan, He revealed a truth which gave the American people the truth about the greatest surveillance state in the history of the world, right? And he knows that. And he knows this is actually his view, that this criminal intelligence establishment, especially under Obama, but as you're not wrong in saying it's continuing somewhat today, but he knows that this would be exposed by bringing Snowden back. And if you bring Snowden back, think what it would mean to pardon Assange. All right, Assange knows that there was no Russiagate. This is what Binney has proven, technically, that the Russians did not hack. Nobody hacked the DNC computers. It was downloaded. He proved that forensically. Assange knows that to be the case. He's tried to say as much as he can to make that clear, but he doesn't want to say where he got the information. Perhaps he will at some point. But this would certainly be to the benefit of Trump in terms of attacking the Russiagate hoax, the attempted coup run by the Democratic Party and the neocon crowd within the Republican Party, the Bush League.
I think that's one of the things that. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear me. I didn't interrupt you. No, I was wondering if you could speak to that. Why you think that Trump then would be the one prosecuting Julian Assange? You know, given everything that you've been saying, like, why do you think that's happening?
Yeah, Trump has nobody around him who agrees with him, right? He's ordered the end of the regime change wars, and his generals just said, "Go to hell. I'm not going to do it." Kelly, Allen, he had to fire them all. He brings on more people. They're the same. Esper, Pompeo, they're the same. These are warmongers. In the case of Pompeo and Esper, you're dealing with a cult that was created at West Point. They were in the same class. A religious cult, a messianic cult that believes in the rapture and so forth, who actually believe that maybe it's a good idea to have a nuclear war because we're all going to be swept up into heaven. Christian.
Do you
So
think
you're dealing
there's
with
reason
the
to be
president.
concerned?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, start again. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, do you think there's any reason to be concerned that Trump may just be pumping his chest the same way in 2016, how he ran on "I love the WikiLeaks, show me the WikiLeaks, release her emails," and then completely abandoned Julian Assange? To when he got into office, he didn't continue fighting back. He just perpetually
set up a back channel
capitulated.
with Rick Grinnell through the German embassy to get a hold of Lenin Moreno and start pressuring Moreno to get Julian out of the embassy. And the CIA's hiring of UC Global, using Trump donor and good buddy Sheldon Adelson as the back channel there in order to facilitate these meetings, where the CIA had direct access to the Ecuadorian embassy, where where in any normal circumstance this case against Assange would be tossed out for any number of highly illegal measures and practices taken upon by the U.S. State Department, the intelligence agencies, and under the official auspice of and the administration of Donald Trump.
No, this is absolutely right. But you can't just say Trump. This is the administration, admittedly, absolutely. But
which begs the question: is he
put your complete faith in Trump? I'm saying, how do we deal with it? I'm sure I don't need to convey to you that what you're dealing with the Democratic Party is a party which has gone completely crazy. They're basically governed by British intelligence anarchy operations. And if we were to have had Hillary Clinton in the White House, I think we would have long since been at war with North Korea, with Iran, God knows who with, but probably Russia and China. We would probably be in a nuclear war. Trump is very clear. Now, I don't know if you caught what happened yesterday, but in his press conference yesterday, while he continues to rant about China, and I personally am something of an expert on China, historically, philosophically, and I absolutely disagree with everything he's saying about China. But as I'm sure you understand, he thinks he needs to get elected by going along with the neocon crowd around him by blaming China for the pandemic and for the economic collapse and so forth. But yesterday, he repeated again that I am loved by the soldiers, but I'm not loved by the Pentagon. And he directly attacked the top generals. And he didn't name Esper or Pompeo, but I believe he was as explicitly as he possibly could saying, I am in a battle with the leading military people in this country. And remember when he first said he was going to send troops into Washington, he did send troops into Washington to stop the chaos there. And all of a sudden, Kelly and Allen and McMaster, all of the generals who gave us the wars in Iraq and Libya and Syria, all of them came out and said, oh, this is illegal. Trump is breaching the Constitution, right? He's going, which is a lie. There have been like 15 or 20 presidents who've deployed the Insurrection Act to deal with race problems in the South and so forth. And deploying troops to stop an insurrection, people burning down cities and so forth, is absolutely legal and within his rights. But you had the top military professionals, including not spoken out, but including, I believe, Esper, Milley, and the people who are in his administration, who are effectively going along with these top generals. And he said, this is the military-industrial complex. They don't like me because they want to have wars, and I'm going to get out of these wars. And I'm not going to start new wars. They're not going to be able to support their business people making bombs. These are his words, practically a quote. So we're dealing here with a insurrectionary situation, which is not just the people on the street. This is military forces, the entire Democratic Party, and leading people within the Republican Party who are committed to the British policy. And it is the British policy that Trump must not be allowed to have a second term, because it would end the special relationship between the US and British, and you would break up this division of the world into the East versus the West. So that we're in a showdown where I believe strongly that Trump wants to pardon Snowden. He wants to pardon Assange. It's to his benefit. It would prove his point that there was no Russiagate. It was a fraud created by the intelligence community in what is effectively a coup attempt against the United States government, a treasonous coup attempt, treasonous because it was done in cooperation with America's real enemy, the British Empire. So that's what we're looking at as the potential for actually resolving this horrendous Assange situation. And I will add, if this moves in the right direction, I think it will also lead to the pardon of Lyndon LaRouche, who started my organization, with whom I've worked with most of my adult life. Because his case, if you don't know about it, was run by Robert Mueller. In the 1980s, Robert Mueller, the same Robert Mueller who ran the coup attempt, really, against Trump, although he got senile and therefore he basically wasn't able to pull it off. But he was head of the Get LaRouche task force in the 1980s that put me in prison. I spent 10 years in prison because of Robert Mueller, for nothing illegal, but because we, in fact, were exposing the criminal apparatus within the American intelligence community, working with hand in hand with the British to prevent what Lyndon LaRouche succeeded in getting Ronald Reagan to do, which was to offer the Russians to work together on building a space-based anti-missile policy, what became known as the SDI, which would have ended the British so-called mutual assured destruction. That we can blow them up, we can blow them up, and we're not going to go to war for that reason. But this keeps a permanent division of the world and justifies the colonial wars that were going on underneath the surface of this so-called mutual assured destruction. The Vietnam fiasco, African wars, South American wars, and so forth. So we're dealing here in a global strategic crisis where we believe we have the opportunity, really for the first time in modern history, to end empire once and for all, to end geopolitics, the idea of zero-sum games. We have the potential of using this crisis, in which the Assange case is only a piece, but a crucial piece, of potentially blowing apart the entire British takeover of American intelligence operations and undermining the ability of us to get back to American system economics, to American system policies, Roosevelt's four freedoms, the original idea of our country as a nation that believed in development and progress for ourselves and for the rest of the world, and was opposed to imperialism. So,
and what does that look like in action? Like, what are the steps that you propose to go this route? Because if Trump is everything that you're saying, that also makes him a president without power in the hall of power. He has the power to move people, clearly.
Yeah.
He has the power to reach a significant number of Americans. But if his presidential whims are ignored, if his presidential agenda is ignored, if the only thing that he can pass as president is several of the largest upward transfers of wealth in human recorded history, then how does what you want to change and come out of this, how does that work? Like, what's on tap? What are you suggesting that needs to happen to make these changes?
The most urgent thing is the fact that Trump, when he is left alone, when he doesn't have John Bolton sitting next to him or Pompeo sitting next to him, is anxious and willing to have real diplomacy with the world's leaders. And as you know, he has refused to give in to this anti-Putin hysteria. He has insisted that he's able to deal with Putin as a strong leader of a strong nation. In collaboration, they basically succeeded in Obama's armed terrorists in Syria. And the reason Flynn was attacked was because he exposed publicly that Obama was consciously arming the terrorists in both Libya and Syria, because this was the regime change policy of the financial institutions that ran Bush and ran Obama. Now, if Trump, who, as you correctly say, is unable basically to get much of this done, but if he were able to get it done, and our proposal is that at this crucial moment in history, that if he were to meet personally with Putin and with Xi Jinping, which is more problematic because he's gone along with this idea that somehow China's to blame for the pandemic and for the economic crisis, but that's his big mistake. If he were to meet Xi Jinping and Putin now, and as you may know, Putin has made a proposal for the so-called P5, the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, to meet. And all of them have agreed to that, including Trump, but they haven't set a date. And if they were to set a date during September, during the UN, which is coming together, and Putin will be speaking there, I'm not sure if Xi Jinping is or not, then it would be possible for him to actually sit down and meet with these leaders and push aside the Pompeos and the Espers and the Wall Street crowd, the Mnuchin people. Because what you said about the economy is absolutely true. There's no question. He has allowed to be implemented a $5 to $7 trillion bailout, almost all of which is going to bail out the gambling casinos on Wall Street rather than helping the American people or American industry. Some of that went. But by and large,
it's 17 trillion that the Fed has printed since August of last year.
What's the number you said?
17 trillion. If you include the CARES Act and the renewal of the tax cuts.
And the bailout for the subprime mortgage
We're
industry.
still paying that.
Yeah.
We're still paying that down. That was 16.9 trillion in 2009. But this is a whole fresh round of it. In August of last year is a little, and the Fed started pumping just hundreds of millions of dollars a day into Federal Reserve banks. That didn't really ease up. And by the time we passed the CARES Act, we had already tacked on like 8.7 trillion in brand new, just created out of thin air wealth. We have a faith-based economy, Mike, and that is, I don't know how long people can keep pretending that numbers on a screen have this meaning.
No, you're absolutely right. Almost all of that money went to bailing out the derivative bubble, the gambling debts, because all you have on Wall Street now is gambling debts. None of that money was being taken by the banks and invested into industry, into even bailing out cities and states. It was going to bail out the gambling debts, and the banks that took this money mostly used it to buy back their own stock to prop up an artificial stock market boom. And here's another mistake that Trump makes, pointing to the stock market boom as evidence of economic progress. That's going to kill him. The greatest danger we have now is that the imperial crowd, the British and their assets in the intelligence community and in the Congress and in the press, of course, if they pull the plug intentionally on this bubble between now and the election, I think that's one thing that could make Trump lose. And you would end up with this rather demented character who's an asset of Wall Street in the White House.
I think the travesty and the thing that should ultimately make the Trump administration lose is the prosecution of Julian Assange, because it just shows that there's no difference between Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump. And to no matter whatever extent, if you're willing to take a knee to the national security state and sacrifice a guaranteed, supposed to be foundational truth of society through the First Amendment, you're no different than the rest of them. And that's the travesty. With all of the economic trouble and all of this, we don't even have the right to know how that money is being used or how our tax money in general is being used because of all of these classified programs.
But I think you'd agree with me that it would be to Trump's benefit to pardon Assange. It would
Absolutely, 100%.
every operation against him. Yeah.
So we were just on an interview just before this with Jason Burmis, and this was actually one of the topics we were discussing, where as we invaded Afghanistan after 9/11, we saw the goalpost move. At first it was Al-Qaeda, and then it was the Taliban. Sorry, there's a semi-truck running by here. But essentially every step of the way, it got further and further and further from actually having an accomplishable or reasonable goal because the goalpost was pushed so far. Yeah. And I think that what we need to be doing as people that legitimately want the truth and want to perpetuate a better society and a better set of fundamental freedoms for the world is not accept rhetoric anymore, accept action. And once those actions are taken, push the goalpost, because it shouldn't just be talking about Snowden. If Trump did a press conference yesterday and he didn't answer every question with, "I am pardoning Julian Assange," that is a travesty. So once he does, the goalpost then needs to be pushed further into prosecuting these war criminals, and then pushed further into prosecuting the intelligence agencies that run them.
Yeah,
and then
I think, you know,
reach a point like that, we'll be able to have a debate with and conversations with China and Russia, because an international union of states should only be predicated if and only if freedom is the fundamental core development inside of it.
You're not going to get any of these unless you get them all. The fundamental message we had in our conference this last weekend, I hope you all get a chance to watch at least the first day. I spoke in the second day, but is that we are at a moment in history in which we're threatened with global thermonuclear war, the worst financial blowout in the history of humanity, with $2 quadrillion. That's the total. You were speaking, you were speaking, Steve, about the 17 trillion. That's true. But the total bubble out there is now 2 quadrillion. Quadrillion being 1,000 trillion. This is there's no way this could be paid, even if you killed every single human being in the world through austerity. It couldn't be paid. So we're dealing with a financial bubble unprecedented in history, a threat of war unprecedented in history. We're dealing with a cultural breakdown, an insurrection on the streets, a general cultural decay with violence and pornography the dominant theme of everything in our so-called entertainment community these days. You know, so this is a crisis which can only be resolved through a new paradigm, what Helga LaRouche calls the necessary new paradigm. You may know that we were the architects of what's now called the New Silk Road, or the Belt and Road of the Chinese. And I'm sure you've seen that the anti-China hysteria going on is accusing the Belt and Road of being an imperial policy, of a debt trap, trying to take over the world from us. Well, the difference is that they are doing what the West absolutely refused to do under colonialism and under neocolonialism. They're going in and doing what they did to their own country in this incredible transformation over 30 or 40 years, reducing poverty to zero as of the end of this year. 700 million people lifted out of poverty. The greatest infrastructure development, mass high-speed rail, maglev, dams, bridges, a space program that's already catching up with the West. This is an unbelievable transformation, and they're taking it to the rest of the world through the Belt and Road, which I personally was very much involved in with Lyndon and Helga LaRouche. We authored these big major reports on the New Silk Road becomes the world land bridge. It's one of the reasons we were hated so much by the oligarchy, that I got put in prison for 10 years. It's because we were breaking through the British system mentality that was taking control of America under virtually every president since Kennedy was assassinated, but certainly under Bush and Obama. So this is a chance to bring the world together around the idea of peace through development. And that's why it's such a casus belli for the British. They cannot allow that to happen. The British financial empire, which runs Wall Street and the City of London, cannot allow the third world to be taken away from them as a source of cheap resources and cheap labor. This is in a sense, the final showdown. But we have to solve the entire thing. We have to have a process like Lyndon LaRouche fought for, and it's the reason I worked with him for the last 50 years of my life, is because this sparks the imagination of the people that there is a way out of this. Like in Africa and South America, where the people are saying, my God, what the Chinese did is unbelievable. We can finally free ourselves of this colonial imperial thinking that we have to remain backwards. It's true for Americans as well, and Europeans. We can break out of this. There's no reason to be subject to this. We can go back to the Roosevelt idea that in fact, it's the general end of the founding fathers for that matter. It's the general welfare that counts. But when you look at something like the Assange case, I agree with you 100%. It's crucial. What they've done to him is one of the greatest outrages of modern history, right? But look at it from the perspective of how that fits into what we can and we must do to transform world history at this crucial moment. And I think his case is a major case of the one affecting the many, that how you can use this if you put it in its context of battling to bring about this new paradigm for mankind as a whole, then in fact, I think that's the way we can win it. And I think we have to be optimistic that we can get Trump to do what he, I think personally, wants to do. As he, you know, you saw what happened when he said this thing about Snowden. People went berserk. How can you say that about Snowden? He's a criminal. He, you know, same thing is true of Assange. There's no reason not to be optimistic that what we do, you and your organization and my organization, do to convince this situation where Trump has to do what he himself has said he wants to do, to work with Putin, to work with Xi Jinping, and to bring about this transformation.
So we're about to, my laptop is about to die now because we are out. We don't have a generator for power or anything like that. So Mike, I want to thank you very, very much for coming on tonight. It was a good talk. I'd love to do this again when we have a little bit more time.
Let me commend you what you're doing, standing out in front of the DOJ. I mean,
we actually have a projector running. You can't see it from here because it's on the lower portion of the building. But we have a projector running right now playing a documentary against the Department of Justice. So even as we're doing this, we're taking action. After this, we're probably going to go and do a candlelight vigil. So it's a night full of fun. But I
Good,
want to
good.
thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me on.
You can find us on Twitter at action_4 Assange. You can find me personally at Andrew Zigmund, Zigmund. And again, I just want to thank Mike for joining us, as our co-host for being on with us.
Okay, good.
Okay.
So long.
Yeah. Good luck to us all.